In the last video, we worked on creating this player hand that organizes the cards along the bottom center of the screen. In this video, we're going to be adding a player deck that when clicked adds cards to your hand. So the first thing we're going to do here in our main scene is right click on main, add a new child node, add a node 2D, and we'll call it deck. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll be very familiar with this. We're going to right click on deck, add child node. We're going to add an area 2D, and then right click area 2D, add child node. We're going to add a collision shape 2D. We're going to come over to the right here in the inspector and set that shape property to a rectangle shape 2D. And then we'll also right click on deck, add child node, and we'll add a sprite 2D. This is the same setup that we have for the cards and the card slots as well. The next thing we need is to import an image for our deck, and I have this deck image that I've made myself, and I'm going to drag it into the file system from my desktop. If you don't have one, I'll leave this one for download in the description. And because my file system is a mess, I'm going to right click on res, create a new folder, and I'm going to call this assets, and then I'm going to drag any things in here that are assets, PNGs, SVGs. I'm going to drag all of these into my assets folder. And while I'm at it, I'll create a script folder and I'll drag all my scripts in there. Now make sure to select your sprite 2D and then drag the deck.png over here into the inspector and drop it in the texture property. And you know the drill from my previous videos, we're going to click on collision shape 2D and then select these little orange boxes and drag the collision so it covers the whole deck image. Then I'm going to click on deck and I'm going to go into the inspector and over to the transform property. And I'm going to set its Y position to 890, which is the same Y position that I have the hand set to. You can see we can go into the player hand script here and the hand Y position is 890. And I'm also just going to set the X to 150 just to give it a bit of space there on the left. Then I'm going to right click on the deck node and I'm going to attach script and I'm going to call this new script deck. I'm going to create a new variable in here called player deck, which is going to be equal to an array of strings. And for now, I'm just going to leave night in there 3 times. Then I'm going to commandeer this process function down here because we're not going to need it. And I'm going to make a new function called draw card, which is the main thing that we want in this deck script. And for now, I'm just going to print draw card just to make sure it works. Now we want to do a raycast when you click and get what's under the cursor. And if the deck is under the cursor, then we want to call that draw card. But there's already a raycast doing exactly that in Card Manager, and we don't want to have 2 raycasts for the same thing. So we're just going to extract this out into an input manager that handles it all. So in the Card Manager, I'll select all this input code, copy it and comment it out for now. Then I'm going to right click on main up here, add child node, I'll add a node 2D and I'll call it input manager. Then I'll right click on the input manager node, attach script, and we'll create a new script called input manager. We can delete the ready and process function that come with this and paste in our input code that we copied from the Card Manager, the one we commented out. We can get rid of this code in the else condition and just put in pass. And then we can get rid of the code for the event pressed, and instead we'll call our new raycast at cursor. Then I'm going to go back to the Card Manager and I'm going to copy the raycast check for card function and I'll paste it into the input manager. I'll then change the name of it from raycast check for card to raycast at cursor, which is the one we're calling in event pressed. And this raycast isn't actually going to return anything, so we can get rid of that return at the bottom, and we can also get rid of this return in the if condition. And instead we're going to create a new variable called result collision mask. And we want to get the collision mask of the result, and we need to get the collider to do that. If we look in the Card Manager, we were getting the collider before. We're getting result 0, so the first result dot collider. So we'll copy this part and we'll paste it here. So our result collision masks equals the first result dot collider dot collision mask. So now we have the results collision mask. We can check if it equals the collision mask of the deck or a card or a card slot, whatever we want. So I'm going to go into Card Manager here and you can see that we've got a couple constants already defining these collision masks. So I'm going to copy them and paste them from Card Manager into the input manager. And so we'll check if the result collision mask is the same as a card collision mask. So if we've clicked on a card, then we'll create a new variable called card found and we'll set it equal to the card node that was found. So to do that, we'll get the first result dot collider dot get parent, which gets the parent of the area 2D or the collider, which is the card node. So this is just doing the same thing as our card raycast did in Card Manager. Now we'll just check if card found, and then we will call start drag in the Card Manager, passing in the card we found. This script doesn't have a reference to the Card Manager yet, so we'll come up here and create a new variable called Card Manager reference. Then I'm going to put back that ready function that the script came with that I said we didn't need. We now need it, and inside we can say Card Manager reference equals, and then we can go up to the Card Manager node up here, click it, drag it and drop it down into here to set that reference. And then down here at the raycast cursor, I'm going to add an elif to add another condition. Make sure your indentation here is correct because you don't want it to be an else of that if card found. You want it to be the else of that if result collision mask equals. And this elif is going to check if the result collision mask is the same as, and then we're going to go up here where we have collision mask card slot. We don't need this, the card slot stuff is handled in the card manager. We can change this to collision mask deck. And now we'll copy that constant name and we'll come down here to our elif and we'll paste it here where it's checking if it's the same. And I'm actually just going to add a couple of comments here so it's clear what's going on. I'm going to say deck clicked for this one and card clicked for the other one. Now we need a reference to the deck before we call that draw card function we created earlier. So I'm going to come up here, create a new variable, call it deck reference. And then in the ready function, we'll set that deck reference equal to, and then we can come over here to our deck node, drag and drop it. And now that we have that deck reference, we can call that draw card function in there once the deck has been clicked. So we'll go deck reference dot draw card. And now there's still some cases of logic that we do want to process in the card manager when you release your left click. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare two new signals, left mouse button clicked and left mouse button released. Then we will emit these signals in our input function in the if event.pressed and the else. Now we need to connect those signals, so we'll go to the card manager script and we'll go to the ready function and we'll get a reference to our input manager by dragging and dropping the node into here. And then we'll do .connect and then the name of the signal we want to capture, which is the left mouse button released is the one we want. And then we have to connect that to a function. So let's just call it on left clicked released. And then of course we'll scroll down here in the card manager and we will create that function and we'll just add a print in here to make sure it works. Before we test this, I'm going to come into the player hand script and I'm going to get rid of this constant hand count. We no longer want to be instantiating the cards in the player hand script. We want to be doing that in the deck script when it is clicked. So I'm going to cut all this card instantiating code out of here and I'm going to add it into the draw card function in the deck script instead. But I'm just going to comment it out for now just so we can test it without this code. And if we run this and just click somewhere, you can see at the bottom in that output, we're getting that print, which is really good that our signals are working and our new input manager is handling those left clicks rather than the card manager. But you're also going to see that we can left click and drag our deck around as if it's a card, which is a problem we had before in our card slots video, which is very easy to fix. We just have to change the collision mask. So if we go to our deck node and click on its area 2D, we can come across here to the inspector and under the collision tab, we'll set the collision layer and collision mask to 3 because cards are 1 and card slots are 2. And if we go to our deck script now and in the ready function, if we print the collision mask of our area 2D, you're going to see something that I warned you about in previous videos, that even if your collision mask is set to 3 in the inspector, it doesn't exactly line up with the code. And you can see if we run this, we will get an output of 4. And this is our actual collision mask that we want to use in the code. So I'm going to comment this out and just put pass here instead for now and then go back to our input manager. And in here, we'll set our collision mask deck constant equal to 4. Now you can see if we test this and we click on the deck and we look at the output, we can see it's calling the function correctly and you can see that draw card is being printed. Really quickly in the card manager, we're going to come down to that function for on left click released. And if we come up here actually to this code we commented out earlier, we have this if card being dragged, finish dragged. We're going to copy that, come down and we're going to paste it in our on left click release function instead of that print. We'll get rid of those comment hashtags and make sure the indentation is correct, and then we can actually just go ahead and delete all of this comment, this func input up here, don't need it anymore. Now we've spent a lot of time on that input manager in this video, even though it's supposed to be a deck video, but it's going to remove so many problems for us in the future if we had 2 raycasts for 1 left click. So I'm going to come back into the deck script and start uncommenting and fixing up this code for instantiating the cards. I'm also going to go to the player hand and cut this whole card scene path line because we don't need it in player hand anymore, and I'm going to paste it into our deck script. Then in the for loop, I'm going to loop for player deck.size and I'm going to uncomment the rest of this out as well. And for that bottom line, add card to hand, we need to get that reference to the player hand before we can call that function. If we test this now and click on the deck, you can see that all 3 cards are instantiated at once and enter our hand. So let's fix this in the draw card function by creating a new variable called card drawn, and we will set that equal to the first element of player deck. And then we'll remove that card from the player deck array. And after that, we're going to make an if statement to check if that was the last card that was just drawn from the deck. And if it was, let's disable the deck's collision so that we can't click it again. And we'll also set the deck image to not visible so it looks like the last card was just drawn from the deck. And I have if deck here, but it's supposed to be if player deck, so I'll just fix that really quick. Then we'll remove this for loop here, just get rid of this line and then indent everything in it back. And now you can see if we give it a test run that every time we click the deck, one card will come down, and if we click the deck 3 times, the deck will disappear, which is perfect, except the cards are coming from the top left, so let's fix that. So if we go to the card scene, we can click on the card node, the root, and if we look at the transform, you can change the position of the X to 150 and the Y to 890, which is the same position that our deck is at. So now it'll look like the cards are coming from the deck. So we'll give this a run here, and you can see every time we click that works, but it looks like the cards are rendering behind the deck, so we just have to change the Z index of the deck sprite here. So we'll go in here and we'll search for Z index, and let's just put this to -2, and if we run this again, we should see when we click on the deck, there we go, it looks like the cards are rendering over the deck now, which is good. And there's one more addition I want to make here. I'm going to right click on deck, add child node, add a rich text label, and I just want to add a card counter to the deck. So I'll also go into the properties now of this rich text label, and I'll look for position, and I'm going to change its position to kind of be more in the center of the card. So I think -9 and -28 here are what I have from before that I think looks good. And I'm also going to set the text to 0 just for now. And in the properties, I'm also going to search for modulate, and I'm going to, under visibility, I'm going to set this modulate here to black just to change the color of the text. I'm also going to search for the scale property and set it to 2 just to make it a bit bigger and easier to read. I'll give that a run now and see how it looks, and it's looking good. We just have to disable the rich text label when the deck runs out of cards. So we'll go back here into the deck script, and we'll just drag and drop our rich text label, and .visible equals false right here. Also, another property of the rich text label I forgot to set is the Z index. Let's also put that to -2 so it's not rendering above our cards. And now after this if condition to check if the deck is empty, but before we instantiate the cards, let's set this rich text label's text equal to how many cards are left in the deck after we've erased a card. If we run this now, you're going to see it gives us an error when we click on the deck because we're giving it an int and it needs a string. So let's just put str and surround our player deck.size with brackets, and that will work now. And let's also copy this line and paste it in the ready function so that when the game starts, instead of defaulting to 0, the deck count will default to however many cards are currently in the deck. So if we give that a run now just to test it, you'll see that when we click on the deck, our cards are instantiated and the count clicks down perfectly. But there is just one small change I want to make, and that's that I want to be able to control the speed that the cards are drawn at. So in the add card to hand, where we're calling that function in the deck script, I'm going to add a new parameter card draw speed. Then I'm going to declare this constant up at the top of the script and set it equal to 0.2. Then if we come into the player hand script and we go to the add card to hand function, we can take in speed as an argument. And now we can pass this along into the animate card to position function. We're also calling this animate card to position function from our update hand positions function down here, so I'm going to pass in speed here too. And then in the function itself, we can take this in as an argument, speed, and instead of this 0.1 hard set value, we'll just change that to speed. And then at the top of the script, I'm just going to create a new constant called default card move speed, and I'll set it to 0.1. And then down here in the update hand positions function, we are passing in speed into the animate card to position function, which doesn't exist in this scope, so instead we'll pass in our new constant. And then we're going to go into the card manager because there's a function in here that is calling add card to hand as well, so I'm going to search for that. And I'm going to pass in that same constant that we just made before, and then I'm going to go up to the top of this script and I'm just going to copy and paste the same constant over just as a default speed. Now if we go ahead and run this, you can see that when I click on the deck, the cards are coming out really fast, and I should now be able to adjust our constant in the deck script, our card draw speed. I'll set it to 1, and now if we give this a run again, we should see the cards come out a lot slower. And it doesn't really look like it worked, so I'm going to see here. So I found the problem here in player hand. We actually sent our speed parameter into the wrong function, so I'm going to replace it there with our default card move speed constant. And then in our update hand positions function, I'll pass in speed. And then in that function itself, I'll take it in as an argument. Then for the animate card to position function in here, instead of using our default card move speed, we'll use our speed parameter that's passed in. And then at the bottom of our script here, this wants a parameter now, so we'll just pass in our constant move speed. And now if we run this, this should be fully working. And you can see that if we draw a card from the deck, it'll be coming out really slow, but you can adjust that speed by changing that constant in the deck script, the card move speed. And so that's it for this video. If you found it helpful, do me a favor and leave a like. And if you're looking for more tutorials such as card abilities and even multiplayer, be sure to subscribe.